Greetings, everybody. Welcome back once again for our wonderful Sunday evening hangout shenanigans, rambunctious brouhaha.
Too many words. Too many words. Stop 3 words ago. You were fine.
You stopped 3 words ago.
A memoir.
I was just going to say, there'll be more next time, a memoir. That's so either optimistic or threatening. I can't decide which. Why not both?
So, today, I was carrying Dennis's little Viper.
Barus.
Barus.
Such a nice knife. Such a nice knife.
Well, I'm glad Dennis feels that way about it.
Stay tuned.
It's his knife.
And because he was carrying my knife, I'll go next. And I was carrying Paul's knife, the Rustic Gent. Oh, it's so schmutzy. So good.
It schmutzes up so easy.
Yeah, that hollow grind likes to show off the... I know.
She sure does. I've been missing that one in my pocket. I'm not going to lie.
Yeah?
Yeah.
You'll get her back eventually.
It's going back. Yeah.
It's the wrong color, or I'd keep it for myself. Anyway. Yeah, Paul.
On that note, you try and keep my knife, I'll stab you with Joe's knife. I'm carrying Joe's Spyderco Smock right now. It's smockalicious. And a little rambunctious in the detent.
Smockerific is...
Yeah, you heard it.
Smocktacular?
Yeah. I think Smocktacular is probably the one I'd go with.
What are you carrying this week, Joe?
Well, Mini Freak Super. I kept the clip on the left-hand side.
Damn straight you did.
Yeah, I looked at him and I thought, like, maybe I'll switch it, but I decided no, fuck it.
I was going to say, whose Super Mini Freak was that, by the way? It's,
Yeah.
You didn't mention.
Oh, it's Nigel's. Yes, sorry. Nigel's Mini Freak Super. Yeah. Giving the little guy another go-around. Yeah.
Yeah. So, on that note, you might be wondering why we're carrying everyone else's knives. Stay tuned for our second portion that will be aired on Friday to find out. It's a secret. But for now, we're going to get into the new second version of the home front design by Ken Yin, brought out by
Field Strip.
Yep.
Come on.
Close enough. Close enough.
Brilliant.
So yeah, second version of the Field Strip by Ken Yin, brought to you by CRKT in the Bonefide.
The D2 version.
Mm-hmm.
The better version.
Yes.
I'm not biased. I don't have opinions. So this marks a pretty radical departure from the last time we saw the Field Strip mechanism. I know it's been kind of done to death on all the big channel reviews talking about how it works, but fuck it. We should probably talk about how it works. So this knife is to address the problem, what happens if your knife is so goddamn filthy, and you just need to clean the little thing out, and you don't want to take a whole bunch of screws apart in order to access the inside of your knife.
I don't like the way you use words, Joe.
No, you shouldn't.
A memoir.
Yes. Yeah. I'll let Paul talk then.
No.
Joe's like, I'm done with words then, apparently.
Yeah, apparently I'm
Someone
not.
else use the words.
I'm not allowed to talk anymore. Yeah.
You can talk as much as you want. I'm just teasing you.
Fair enough. Yeah. Major point, I suppose, to bring up is the fact that, as illustrated in this beautiful picture, that I can focus. I can work my computer. I understand how this thing works.
Sure you can.
Yeah.
You should blame Google, I think, but yeah.
Well, technically it is running in Chrome. I don't like the zoom gradient on this thing, but it's using ball bearings. It's a 3-piece deconstruction when you're using the Field Strip. It's using an aluminum outer shell with steel inset liners. It feels pretty premium compared to a lot of what CRKT's had to offer in the past. So this is a welcome change, I think, for most people.
Have we mentioned that the bearing race seems to be held in place, like it's not removable?
Yes. The cage, the brass cage of the pivot itself actually... Ooh, there we go. This guy in here, the brass part itself actually shifts within the steel. So I think that they've taken the hole where the pivot pin goes through and they've kind of flared it out slightly on either side to sort of hold it captive in place.
They
So not
said that they like pressed it into a tube to
yeah.
be able to fit. Yeah, I watched a review yesterday, something that was mentioned. Yeah.
Yeah. So it results in a pretty nice action for something that you can pop apart very, very quickly. Yeah. Anybody else have any opening comments before we get into the...
Mr. Fisk posted a comment in chat that says, we're worried about our knives getting gritty in the field, so we made a knife that runs on bearings. I think we'll probably get to that point at some point in the review.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It may or may not
Well,
be.
you see, you can spit on them. Get them clean and going at the same time.
But what if I'm dehydrated and I don't have enough spit to spit on my knife? You have blood.
I mean...
So,
Okay,
who's up first for the
this took a
review?
dark turn. Yeah, really. Like, let's get into some scoring here, for sure.
Yeah. Who's on first?
I'll go first. I haven't gone first in a long time.
Cool.
I gotta find my own score though. There we go.
That definitely helps.
Yeah. I scored it a 72. It was a C plus. Snuck in on a C plus. So cost versus materials, honestly, for what they're doing on this thing with all the extra machining for the built-in bearings and the field strip and the steel liners and knowing CRKT's price point in the past, $100 for what you're getting is actually pretty reasonable. So the fit and finish, not bad. I found the corners a little bit sharp on the actual handle itself. They could have done a little extra chamfering on it type of thing and made it a little bit rounder instead of the square brick that it is. But it's neutral as far as the finger choil, so I think it is going to like a lot of people are going to like it, which leads into like ergonomic execution, right? So low point cutting ability, it is a little bit thick, and for a shorter blade, it reminds me almost like a 940 on steroids. We'll get into that point, I guess, later as a wrap up, but on the personal side of things, lockup and actuation, I did score it a 9 because it is very smooth, and for something that you can take apart, even the Teflon ones, I was kind of surprised on how centered they were when you take apart, and I'm sure over time you're going to have to fiddle with that and bring that back to centered by fully disassembling it and tightening some pivot screws up and over time, whatever, right? But yeah. Material choice, yeah, they're coming around. It's aluminum, steel liners to get the job done, like as far as the mechanism goes, and G2. I'm like, yeah, it's not bad for what it is. Aesthetics, I really like it. I put an asterisk on this one. I don't want to exactly say why I really love that blade shape until we're actually all said and done, because I'd like to bring it up as a final point if I can.
All right.
Pocket ergos, it's right hand only, bitches. I like its deep carry, but it's right hand only, so it gets a 3. Ergonomic preference, those hard corners for me actually did dig in.
Just out of curiosity, just to see where your score would have been otherwise. If it had been left-hand carry, what would you have scored it?
Probably like an 8 or something. It actually sits pretty low, and it's pretty slim knife, and yeah, it's a little bit heavy for what it is. So, I mean, like it's pushing a Domus heavy, but it's a little bit longer. Like as far as the crew wear, they're in the same ballpark. It's the same weight as a Super Freak. It's 4.3 on this one. Ergonomic preference, those square handles did kind of bite into me. If I was going to be using this in the field, I would want a really firm grip. I'm not pinch gripping this knife, gentlemanly carry, and so those square corners would bite in, unless you're maybe gloved. And then enthusiasm, it's more for the fact that CRKT can come out with this package at a reasonable price is why my enthusiasm is a 6, more than the actual knife is itself. So,
okay,
fair.
It's CRKT kind of coming around to where you would hope there would be, kind of idea.
Yeah, pressed in ball bearings with tubes and take apart features and Ken Onion's royalty on top of that, and still, take a little bit for the customers that aren't going to be like, you want how much for a crossbones? So anyway.
Yeah. I still bought one like an idiot, but that's
Anyway. So that's my review.
okay. I'll go next. Yeah. I've been a little bit more kind to this thing. It checked a lot of boxes for me. I gave it an 81, which is a B. A single point away from being a B+. So, objectively, for what you could expect from CRKT, much less at this price point, I think D2 aluminum ball bearings, all the points that Dennis talked about, in addition to the field strip and just the weirdness of the mechanism, kind of the niche product that it kind of is, or at least that it's trying to be, I gave it a 9. I think it's just such a good package for the price that, yeah, okay, this is what you should have been doing a long while ago, CRKT. Cost versus fit and finish gets an 8. D10 seemed a little bit different model to model, not by much, but enough to warrant a noticeable difference. Cutting ability gets a 7. It's a little thick behind the edge. You could fix that with some reprofiling work, but it does come a little bit fat, like Dennis was saying. Ergonomic execution, it's a pretty neutral grip. It feels good in hand. You could use it as a work knife fairly well. It gets an 8. Lockup and actuation, I gave it an 8. Not quite up to Dennis's 9, only because I found the D10 to be a little bit mushy. Only a little bit, but just enough that it was kind of slow getting it going. But it does fire once you get enough force behind it.
And I know that's going to come up in future episodes, too, about the mushy versus the crisp D10s. Yep. I actually don't mind a softer D10 myself. And I know Joe definitely leans on the almost hurt your finger kind of crisp D10s.
Because he's a monster.
So that's funny because we're putting lockup and actuation in an objective category, but both me and you took a very personal kind of look at that particular category on our personal preference of actuation more than the lockup, probably.
At least we only differed by a point on that particular aspect.
Yeah, for sure.
Actually, I think so far that's the only difference between our objective scores. Yeah, holy crap, wow.
Very close.
But now here's where things get different. On the personal side of things, material choice, I like aluminum handles. I really do. They're lightweight. They're nice to the touch, generally speaking. I like the way CRKT does their aluminum, for the most part. There's a bit of a caveat there, but I'll get to that in a sec. Aesthetics, I really like the way this knife looks. When I first saw it, I thought it was a little bit blobbish, like kind of ill-deformed, but the more I saw it on video and then I finally got it in hand, I'm like, no, I really do like this. The pointed forward portion to the handle in the center there, I really like that. Yeah, it's a decent looking knife, and I'm very happy that they differentiated between the back end of the handle and the forward end with that fake bolster line, because it's silly, but bolsters are cool.
I was hoping someone was going to dabble on kind of a cool texture between the smooth bolster, and it's one of the reasons I like the tactical Quaken from Boker, and like there's a couple other like models that have that similar.
I just zoomed in here. It's a little ripply. It's not quite as heavily textured. Paul actually brought up a good point today while we were in the shop, talking about how the Liang Ma design, the Lanny, was actually quite slick in the hand in comparison to this. I wonder if it's because of the anodization that they did here, because the texture is somewhat similar. I think this is maybe a little bit more
I think it
subtle,
has to do with the rounding too. Something about the like the Lanny does have more of this.
The contouring might have actually lent itself to,
the square handle might actually lend it to sitting in your palm a little bit more firm.
Right.
Whereas the Lanny tried to go for ergos in the hand and ended up just feeling like it was going to twist every time you wanted to cut something, right? So
pocket ergos, though, I did give this thing an 8. This thing sits really nicely in the pocket for the length of the overall piece and for the size of it. It feels really nice in pocket. Aluminum is so lightweight. This doesn't feel I don't really know what to compare it to from my collection right here, but it doesn't really weigh down the pocket. Oh, here, like an AD-15 would. The amount of steel in this thing is just minimal enough to get the job done, and I do appreciate that.
Joe's like, it's not that heavy when I'm pulling it off my tactical vest with 9 other knives. Like,
Tactical vest.
Like,
oh boy,
that's the next step for you. You know it is. We'll have that conversation
I
later.
was just gonna say, don't give me ideas. Ergonomic preference. It's a neutral handle. Like, there's no finger choils. There's a very slight curvature to it. I'll bring that picture back up because it, again, is a nice picture. On the back end, I thought that lanyard tube might be a bit weird due to the positioning, but it actually sits in the swell of my palm fairly nicely in a forward grip, and even in a hammer grip, it sits back far enough where it doesn't really negatively interact with any part of my hand. I like it. Again, a little bit blobbish, but it does work. Not quite as blobbish as the wrinkle, though. I'll never forgive that knife for existing. Yeah, the enthusiasm is a 9.
I gotta admit, when you have the texture that you have on this Bonefide, I mean, we got some reminiscent wrinkle. We got some reminiscent wrinkle going on.
It's not. Yeah.
Wrinkle reminiscent. I just want to give a quick shout out to John in chat. What's going on, brother?
Hey, man.
Hey, John.
Hey,
Glad you could join us, guys.
Nice to see you. Enthusiasm gets a 9. Yes, it's partly to do because of the cost. Rather, 120-ish polar bear dollars for this thing. Like, it's pretty affordable for D2 ball bearings, the field strip, aluminum handles, Ken Onion's name attached to it. Like, it's a great package for the price, and it is innovative, and it is something where if you're outside working in dusty, crappy conditions a lot of the time, this is probably going to be a feature that you will be interested in. But
I'm just starting to laugh at Paul laughing at the great package.
Hey, great package for the price.
Yeah.
I'm a child.
I'm glad you said it.
Well, on that note, Paul, you want to give us your score?
Yeah, I can do that.
You should do that. What do you mean, potentially? Here, look at this wonderful picture of it disassembled first while we wait for Paul.
The interesting thing about Dennis's score is if it had left-hand carry, he would have given it about 5 extra points, which would have been a 78, which is what I gave it.
I see this. Yeah.
That's funny.
I think I was a little more hatery than you guys as far as materials and fit and finish as far as like cost goes. And I think specifically there's a picture that I shared with Joe where you can see the front lip of the aluminum where it is slightly cracked and looks like it's starting to peel away.
Yes. Let me find that here. Anyway, continue talking. It might take me a moment.
I'm considering silence until you get the
That's good TV right there.
Yeah, super entertaining.
What it comes down to is the aluminum casting. Did you not get the pictures either?
I didn't get that email. No.
Okay. Maybe I'll send them to Nigel. Maybe Nigel can put them up for the video that goes up. But anyways, the casting gets very thin around the outside edge. You might be able to pull up that picture of the knife disassembled. Maybe it's in there. But where the liner lock comes through the handle, there's a very sharp corner, and it has ever so slightly started to crack right at the edge of that.
To sort of illustrate where this was taking place, I'll use one knife as a pointer. So on the aluminum, right next to my scar here.
Yeah.
It's basically happening right in there where my knife is pointing.
Yeah, it's peeled back towards the knife tip, kind of.
Interesting.
I have a theory as to why that's happening, by the way. But
we were talking about it being cast aluminum, right, as opposed to milled aluminum.
Yes. It would explain the price point. Cast aluminum is very cheap to manufacture by comparison to 3D machine billets.
All right. Fair enough.
It might even explain the slightly blobbish shape that Joe was talking about too. It's going to have a little more I don't want to say rounded corners, but lack of definition potentially.
Yeah.
I sound like I'm really hating on the site, but I actually really like it. But the cutting ability, I gave an 8. I actually scored it a little bit higher than both of these guys. It is a little chunky behind the edge, but I think they did a pretty good job of thinning it down to a point where it's a usable edge. It's going to survive, especially with D2. It's going to survive cutting for a good long while before you really start to notice it's slowing down. It may not shave, but it'll still function, if that makes sense.
It may not shave right now, let's be honest.
At least
anyway. Ergonomic execution, I gave it an 8 because it's a very neutral handle. It seems big enough for most hand sizes. Lock up and actuation, I gave a 9 because every single time I flicked that flipper, it opened. Whether the detents were different from knife to knife, but they weren't so different as to make the knife unusable, even though they weren't necessarily to my preference. On the personal side of things, I gave material choice and aesthetic a 7. I really like the blade on this thing. The handle, I don't like as much as far as the aesthetics go.
Just got a shot of it in hand here. Yeah.
Material choice, D2 and aluminum are definitely decent options. I have paid more money than I would care to admit for that exact package in a Italian-made SR1, but it's not my favorite steels. It's probably not my top 5 necessarily, if that makes sense.
I know some guys out there live and swear by D2 tool steel, but yeah, it's.
I like D2, but I like other things more.
Yeah.
Pocket ergos, I gave it 8 with the smooth aluminum and the pocket clip they have on that knife. It slides into pocket really easy. You were talking about this thing shredding my pocket. The Bonefide's not going to shred your pocket. It's just going to sit and ride comfortably every time you want to put it away. And for enthusiasm, oddly enough, as much as it sounded like I was shitting on this knife, I give this thing an 8. I really like Dennis was saying, the direction that CRKT is taking with this knife. And I would like to see more in this direction because it's a nice... it's basically what we've been talking about for the last 3 years happening.
Yeah.
Exciting times.
Yeah. But yeah, that's my score.
Paul,
yes, sir?
Did you have a picture of the inside of the handle by any chance?
I took a picture, but apparently it didn't show up to Joe.
Okay. Were you going to talk about that point on your score at all?
That was the conversation about the crack.
Oh, no. Sorry. The inside of the handle where the blade hits the inside of the spacer.
Oh, right. No, I totally forgot about that. No.
Well, shit. There's a good thing I brought up a picture. Yeah. I was leaving that topic for you again.
No, I appreciate it. No, I'm disappointed in myself.
Anyway, let's go from last topic on that conversation. Grab Nigel's score, and we'll come back to that because you missed out, you son of a bitch. Let's go. Yeah. Good up.
All right, Nigel, what did you give this thing?
Well, can you all guess that we're in for a ride?
Oh,
so we've reached the top of the roller coaster, and we're just at the crest and beginning to plummet.
Oh yeah, we are. Oh yeah, we are.
Where are we going? How bad is it?
We are dropping all the way down to a 60.
What the hell, Nigel?
D.
What the hell?
It's the personal side, man.
No.
There's a couple objectives
too.
Yeah.
You've got a couple 6s that you have to explain to yourself, my friend.
Yeah.
Especially for a $99 price point.
Mm-hmm. Well, for cost versus materials, I was noticing the cast aluminum versus the milled aluminum, and that's kind of where I was basing the 7 on that for the price point for cost versus materials. Fit and finish, I was noticing once it was all together, it was still somewhat gappy along the back spacer and whatnot, so I was thinking that weird casting Once they cleaned it up, they rounded it out too much, so that led to the gapping or something like that, and I found that odd.
Do you have pictures of the gapping at all?
I don't. No.
Okay.
Yeah. The cutting ability, like you guys have mentioned, it is chunky behind the edge. If I were to ever have this knife, I would Scandi that out, and it would actually cut nicely.
Yeah.
My
Well,
Huko dentist does scan it out for me.
I didn't quite Scandi it, but I did take the it's got a bunch of crap all over it. The D2 pillar, and I gave it a 17-degree edge because you're right, it was very thick behind the edge with the original 20-degree grind.
But even then, they do at least some sort of hollow grind on the pillar. They did nothing on this guy. And it's almost convex on the secondary grind.
Yeah.
It's aggressively chunky, I will say.
Yeah.
I'm just my other kind of query about some of the objective scores is some of the other CRKTs that we've scored in the past, and just not knowing, like, looking at some of those scores compared to some of these scores that I'm seeing. That anyway, I'd like to compare some of the other fit and finish scores and cutting ability scores on some other stuff, like a Duhawk or something. Like,
So
anyway.
A quick query before we move on from cutting ability. I know in the past that I've said I tend to view 7 as like, this is acceptable, but you're doing the bare minimum for me to think that it's acceptable. Where does that sit for you on the point scale there? Like how?
I think that bar kind of definitely sits lower, but just with the thought in my mind of instantly I wanted to change the grind on that knife and make it something else. That's why I kind of dropped it down.
Fair enough. And I mean, we can't all be Nick Shabazz. We can't all want the sliciest, thinnest things in the world. And I think for the field strip tech, you're kind of expected to view this knife as sort of a just kick the shit out of it sort of knife, like something that you're expected to abuse and get dirty. I can accept a thicker grind, so maybe that's where there's this bit of dissonance where you're looking at it and you're like, this isn't going to cut.
And it's not that I don't enjoy a thicker knife or anything, but like how I mentioned that it was almost convex on the secondary grind, I think that's the point that really got to me about it.
Right.
Is even if they had done it like a little bit more flat or just like a slight hollow grind to it, it would have done a lot better, I think.
Here's the thing. They did do a version that was flat ground, but they made it out of 4116 groove.
Yeah.
And then they powder coated it, the bastards. I think this would have been a very different conversation had they given us the full flat grind in the D2.
Oh yes, definitely.
Which a decision that's still baffling to me, but anyway.
Well, sorry, never mind. Go ahead, Nigel. I apologize.
Okay. Ergonomic execution, I gave it an 8 because of the square chunkiness of it. I found like it was a nice length of the blade. It fit my hand, or a nice length of the handle, and it fit my hand quite well. But I didn't enjoy how square the corners were and how flat it was. It just a little chunky, a little blocky, and whatnot. Lockup and actuation, I don't know. It was just meh. It was all right. Liner locks, like I think I've said in the past, that kind of the bar so far is the access lock at a 9. So I've kind of pulled everything down from there. So it was decent. Nothing crazy bad, nothing crazy good.
But that almost puts your personal side of what you like as a locking mechanism and not really on the objective side of things. As far as the lock.
You've used that point before.
What do you mean? The access lock in the liner? I don't score low. I will score liner locks 8s and 9s. I'll score them on the same plane that I will an access lock.
Yeah.
If it's got like a good detent, snaps open good.
They've got to be pretty exceptional though to get
doesn't have a ZT, doesn't have a ZT detent stop that hangs it up, things like that, right? So,
but then we could also argue that my points about the hollow grind or the convex grind for the cutting ability could be a personal preference thing as well.
Well, but that comes down to, again, we've talked about where we put the cutting ability. Is it Paul cutting a piece of paper, or is it you talking about the ritual where it's practicality, or
Yeah.
does it talk about Joe where the different steels come into play on whether you give it a 7 or an 8? Like we've talked about that several times on like that particular category comes up again and again, right?
I feel like all
So
those ideas are valid for their own reasons.
yeah,
Yeah.
but it also comes down to a more of a personal choice than it
Yeah,
does an
honestly,
objective choice, right?
honestly, as far as this knife getting a 6 for cutting ability, I find it difficult to fault Nigel on it.
I gave a 7. No, that's
Yeah.
fine.
Yeah,
It's
no,
just like
it's-
This
overall,
point's more
yeah.
about the lockup he's talking now.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, as far as the lockup,
the access locks versus the liner locks compared to the whatever type of thing, right? Like it's but we keep on talking about the objective side of things and still letting your personal get into the way of things.
yeah,
And a lockback being just a 5 because you happen to not like lockbacks, even though they might have a really crisp half stop or whatever. And like I don't know. Like
I don't know. In kind of in my mind, it breaks down to the point that I'm just grading the knife. I'm not grading the knife as a lockback, or I'm not grading the knife as a liner lock and grading how that lockup is. I'm just grading the lockup in general of lockups.
Okay, but you said that like an access lock gets a 9 and then you go down from there type of idea.
Yeah,
right?
because
So-
objectively, the access lock is way better than anything else.
Okay. Yeah. So
Yeah, like objectively, yeah, it is.
so not to belabor the point too much further, I do think that a 7 is still an acceptable score for the lockup and actuation. Again, I am a little bit biased, but I do think that if you're going to have major criteria for, let's say in this case, a flipper liner lock or flipper frame lock, it should be easy to open. It shouldn't be painful. I know we'll talk about that later. And it should be crisp. You should feel intention with what you're doing, and it shouldn't be difficult.
Mhm.
This definitely, to me, takes a little bit more effort than minimal effort. So, yeah.
Yeah, like for me, kind of a 7 for the lockup means that it does its job, it does it good, but there's nothing that wowed me about it, but there's nothing that snagged me about it either.
I will agree. Actually, I'll say, like, for CRKT, I was blown away by this action. But for flipper liner locks in general, I mean, Civivi exists in that same market. I mean, they have better versions of flipper liner locks in their own catalog that have better actions. So,
Yeah, so I'm not calling out. I'm just saying that there's categories that we have on the objective side that we are definitely, all of us are letting sway into our own personal preferences, and that's becoming hard to score because it's becoming areas of contention when it comes to the scoring and stuff, right?
Yeah.
So yeah,
I believe I have the solution.
we should probably finish Nigel's score.
It's in chat. Mr. Fisk is saying the only clear path forward is to throw away your current system and adopt the Fisk system.
Well, I have to figure out how much a tire scores for first, and then we'll get back to you on that.
And then base that against a giraffe.
I was just going to say, this nets 7 out of 15 giraffe tongues and 14 out of 13
Why
rhino
is it
horns.
out the giraffe? Like,
You can't carry the whole thing at once.
Anyway, let's get on to Nigel's personal.
Getting onto the personal, that's where it really tanked out for me.
No kidding, hey?
Material choice, once again, getting onto that cast aluminum aspect of it. There's always going to be discrepancies with it. It'll be hard to control any air bubbles or miscastings and stuff like that. So it's just, you'll get a more consistent and more reliable product if it was milled rather than cast. So that's why it came down for that. Aesthetics for me, I find that there's way too much belly and almost a leaf blade shape on the cutting edge of the blade compared to how straight and kept-hardy the spine is. And I find that an odd juxtaposition. I don't really like it.
So it's the blade that kind of kills it for you.
Yeah, more so than the handle. I do enjoy, like how Dennis mentioned, the dual texture tone of the handle.
Right.
That's like a nice variance to it.
But that blade.
Yeah, I find it awkward, honestly.
Fair enough. I did briefly consider myself if you were to take the knife closed and you were to chop it, kind of like how they did with the crossbones, like, would I like that more? I think the answer might be yes, but anyway.
Valet
Like-
it up a little bit and get rid of that.
Like, I
hump,
don't
right?
necessarily mind I don't mind the bottom half of the blade, the cutting edge, and I
Yeah.
don't mind the spine half of the blade, but I find them odd together. Like, it gets into that
Some weird dissonance
smiling
there.
on the top half and frowning on the bottom half thing.
Like I said, turning it into a valet is kind of what
Yeah.
you're trying to get.
Yeah, that
rid
would
of.
do nicer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It kind of reminds me of the Bark River. What is it? The Kalahari Hunter?
A little bit, yeah.
Mhm.
That like the hump on the back more so than the belly necessarily, but
Yep.
looks like it's been in a bar fight. It's got a broken leg.
So
Brutal.
for pocket ergos, I gave it a 4 because as it's being the right hand only, I'll only give it a 5 at the highest. And once again, with the chunky blockiness of it, I found it noticeable. There were corners and edges on it that got in the way, I noticed. Ergonomic preference, it fit nice, but once again, chunky blocky handles. And then the enthusiasm, I gave it a 2. Main reason for that is, in my mind, for what the field strip is supposed to be and the ability to clean it out, why are there so many holes and gaps in the liner that's protecting the mechanism? If it's to the point that I want to take my knife apart to clean out the bearings, the grit and dirt that's going to be getting in there is also going to be getting in underneath that liner in through all those little gaps and holes, and that bugs the hell out of me.
It did when you first saw this knife, and it still does. Yep.
Yeah.
Honestly, I have such a hard time coming to a consensus in my own mind as far as what I think about that particular issue, because until you put that knife through its paces, it's going to be hard to say exactly how it's going to be. But
with those holes and gaps, like if you drop it in wet mud, that wet mud's going to get in those holes and gaps. Like
small particles and silt, that kind of shit. Yeah,
Yeah.
It's going to permeate. Absolutely, it will.
Just stick it around in some water for a minute. It'll be fine.
I think what this honestly is a solution to not the type of just like super destructive grit that you're envisioning, but more like loose debris, right?
Like in a construction setting where it would be only like drywall dust or something, you could use an air compressor to blow out the liner sort of thing. More acceptable, yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Honestly, aside from falling into like a muddy puddle, I could see this being used at a farm and without much issue, and it being disassembled very easily, cleaned out at the end of the day, and it not ever really being a problem.
And I know that Paul said it jokingly about swishing it out with water, but realistically, what the issue is with rinsing a knife out is the bearing mechanism and the oil and the pivot and stuff like that. There's literally nothing wrong with the stainless steel and the aluminum to put that through a rinse or a pressure, get home to take your tap, and with the side hose go, because you're not actually affecting the pivots or the bearings or anything, right?
Yep.
So I know you said it jokingly, but like realistically, that would be an alternative too.
Both. I understand the what Nigel's saying too. Mr. Fisk is making a funny comment in chat about the fact that if you just let it fill up with dirt, eventually it will be full of dirt, and therefore no more dirt will get in.
Done and done.
Yeah, you'll have to dust your hands off after handling the fucking thing.
They're going for a saturation effect.
Yeah, I don't like that at all. The one thing that does kind of concern me about putting caged ball bearings pinned by a tube into a D2 blade, if you're going to get the knife so dirty that it warrants a disassembly for cleaning, and that's the intention behind this knife, why would you use D2 and not powder coat the areas that are completely inaccessible? Because if that tube in the very center of the picture I've got up right now, if that tube, there's two different things that could happen here. Either it is D2 or it's some other material, and either way, you could get crap underneath the cage of the ball bearing, permanently getting trapped on the underside of the cage.
I highly doubt it's D2, for the record. I think it's probably a very maintainable stainless.
Okay, so let's say it's like a 304 hardened.
Something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And if that either way, there's no way to access that part of the knife to clean up the inside. And they chose to powder coat the 4116. Like, that just blows my mind. But
Okay, on that note, I actually have a follow-up on that where I do actually have some notes on that as well. Also with the D2 factor and taking this knife apart and putting it back together, you're handling the inside around where those bearings are and those pivots because you're lining and clicking stuff up. And then you're closing the knife around the oils of Joseph's hands. And 3 hours later, that blade snaps in half because it's corroded with that thin little line that's holding the bearings in place.
Can't look at the patina on this.
Anyway, get your scar out of there. All I'm saying is also the fingerprint factor with D2 and a non-coated blade, like you were contrasting with the 4116. I think it's even more alarm for corrosion, things like that, because you're handling where you're about to trap that knife inside, right? So
they did address this. They did address this in one way that CRKT has been doing a lot lately. Their limited edition version of this knife came with not only titanium handles, they came with S35.
One other thing I want to comment about, well, two other things I want to comment about this before we wrap it up here. I know we're a little past, but one thing was the fit and finish. Paul forgot to mention the inside of the blade kind of digs the handle a little bit. So
it definitely connects with the inside of the handle.
There's a picture that I sent you of a disassembly that someone may or may not have done on their other review channel.
Yeah.
In the last three pictures that I showed you.
Yes.
And you can see in that picture how close the blade actually sits next to the backspacer. Commented on the backspacer being like a good flow to it, but kind of a big lanyard tube. If you zoom in on those two areas, especially the actual stop pin that holds the thing in place, if you shake that closed with any sort of like drop shutty action, because CRKT kind of got the drop shutty action on this one, it dings off the inside of that pin that holds the knife handle in place.
Really?
Pin.
Even when the thing's fully assembled and engaged,
that's when it
Yeah.
does it, because you're drop shutting it.
Yeah, I was just saying,
Something
like
as simple as doing that will damage the knife.
Yeah.
That's unfortunate. Yeah.
And because this knife actually does have some good actuation, whether that's a score of contention or not, CRKT actually got some drop shot action on this. So I was drop shutting this knife pretty nicely, and Paul actually noticed a small little spot where that stop pin lock bar thingy actually will touch the blade. So crappy on that.
Now,
and go ahead.
there is something to be said for the fact that one or two sharpenings, and that probably would not be an issue anymore. Because the blade would then be far enough away.
Yes, but if they didn't encourage such a kind of big, obnoxious lanyard hole, they could probably modify that construction and put that pin, I don't know, a 1/16 of an inch further down and not be a problem.
Yep. True.
So little column A, little column B on that one, right? So
that is a huge lanyard hole, yeah.
And then the last thing I want to talk about is the reason that I gave this personal preference a 9. I like the texture of the handle and the whatever, and what Nigel doesn't like about the blade shape. The only thing I see is a Benchmade 960 or even a Benchmade 930 Colgera, which I didn't send you a 930 Colgera, but if you bring up the pictures of the Benchmade Osborne 960s in all their glory.
Oh, you want the collection shot? Yeah.
Well, I picked one out because it's the TI one, and I'm a sucker for it. But
leave it up there for a moment, then pop this
guy
over. If you
look
at
the blades, I don't think you can see the blade as good on the TI version as you can in the collection. But it is totally. What's that?
It's totally the same blade shape.
You talk to Ken Onion about that, and I'm sure Warren Osborne.
The front third, most definitely. The back third, it still stays straight on the Benchmade one, where it on doesn't. The yes. Yeah, and that's what gets me is how much of a belly the whole way it has.
It's a Ken Onion. I'm surprised it doesn't have recurve.
Yeah.
Well, like you were saying, within one or two sharpenings.
You're doing it right.
What's your definition of
just send it to another shop locally here in town, and it'll get recurved for you. Just no problem.
Ooh,
so yeah, on that note, we should head on out before it gets any more slanderous.
Yeah, I'm just saying, Warren can't defend himself anymore. Mr. Osborne's gone. Someone's got to speak up for him.
What's the total, Joe?
Yeah.
The score total.
You kind of want to know those things, don't you?
Yeah.
Well, after Nigel scored it to 60, it should even some shit out here. Jesus Christ.
It kind of tempered our expectations, I suppose.
That's what I do.
So, here she is. Overall, for our all-time rankings, this landed at a number 38 with an average score of 72.75.
2.75. There we go.
Did it
The
beat the
score
Capara?
for the Bone Fide.
Wait, sorry.
72.75.
I actually... No, it should be a little bit lower. I wonder about that.
No, mine's a 73, dude. Or was it a 72?
72.
I was going to say, I got Nigel's score was entered incorrectly for whatever reason. I must have looked at the wrong sheet when I was entering that in.
Joe.
So I'll take that back. Just going to double check here. Oh, something screwy happened. All the scores are different. What the hell happened?
For shame.
Wow, that's it.
Yeah,
That's it.
well, that's okay. That'll just take a second for me to fix.
So while Joe's fixing that, I'm gonna just wax poetic about as much as I liked the Bonafide in my pocket, the lanyard hole, that giant ass lanyard hole that they jimped for some reason, is the only thing I don't like about it being in my pocket. First of all, why do you jimp a friggin' lanyard hole? That doesn't make any sense.
For that stealthy reverse grip.
I was just going to say.
I hate it.
It's
nonsense.
It's true, though.
But when you reach into the pocket, all you feel is that jimping on the side of your head. It's not
ready for action.
No. All right, sorry about that. No, I double guessed myself. I did do it correctly the first time. I don't know why I thought something was off there. That's funny.
And yes, it did beat a Capara. But Nigel was also hatery on a Capara, and we were slightly more hatery than we were on this knife. So
Yep. And on a side note, the Scribe does really nice as a little marking cutting knife. It does well because I just had to cut out another little strip here.
Oh, nice.
Oh, I can't wait to hate on that knife because Nigel's going to score it an 80. Balance in the world, right? Balance in the goddamn world. That's all I'm saying. Anyway.
It's right hand only. It'll only get 75.
All right. On that note, where did that go in the scoring?
I was correct the first time. It is open, but not Nigel's placement. Yes.
As I've already written on the second.
It's fine. I'll reimburse you for the materials lost.
So it was 72.75?
It was 72.75.
All right.
Yep.
That's what the Bonefide came in as.
Bonefide.
Bonefide. What are you looking for?
Just for Justin.
Yeah, I was just going to say, what are you looking for, Bonefide?
It came in just under the PM2.
All right.
What's it above?
It is above the Lanny.
Okay.
It deserves to be above the Lanny.
It does.
So yeah, with that little bit of officialness done and out of the way, we are late for our government mandated break here. So we're going to get off on that. Make sure everyone out there heads on off and empties out your bladder, refill your drinks in the appropriate orders, and we shall return shortly with everyone. See you soon.